Folks, you're with Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about education and how it's sort of how it's been dumbed down to unimaginable levels. A lot of this is, if not most of it, is due to, well, on one side, the socio-political desire to create equal outcomes and to sort of bring equity to the education system by, in effect, dumbing everybody down so that everybody gets a participation trophy, which they now call like a PhD. But it's also to undermine Western society and say that everything that white societies have achieved, which is a long list of achievements, everything white society has achieved is bad or evil or racist or Nazi or this or that, or to somehow degrade and humiliate all Western achievements and structures and views, and to artificially elevate all others. So there's it's taken a vast amount of propaganda to do that. So in order to, because the Western societies are the highest achieving societies ever in human history. So in order to degrade and humiliate Western societies, it requires lies upon lies upon lies upon more lies on top of that. And so it's changed the education system to be one that's not fact-based or reason-based, but one that's lies and propaganda-based, deception-based, duplicity-based, and so on. So it's changed the very nature of what education's for. Now, the idea of education to create knowledgeable, capable, learned workers in an advanced, technical and industrial society, which was, I guess, one of the prime considerations of an advanced education. Everyone can read and write and do mathematics and solve complicated problems, that type of thing, and have powers of reasoning. That's all gone by the wayside now, and instead the idea is to create people who have no faith in anything, who have no confidence in anything, and who can be controlled by emotional signals and trumpet blasts and so on. So anyway, this is the whole concept of education. Its purpose has changed. It's now a vehicle to allow the globalists to take social control of Western societies. Now, I've seen a number of pieces, and one recently which sort of had me chuckling a little bit, but I've seen a number of articles and pieces around talking about how the student the school student of 1970 who'd finished junior high school, the level of education then was very rigorous compared to what it is today, at least. So let's have a look at that. And there's a number of articles that are saying that a kid that finished junior high school in 1970, for example, has approximately the same level of education, considering the rigor and the requirement to pass tests, that somebody who's, say, got a sociology master's degree or even a sociology PhD today. Now, that seems astonishing. What, you mean a PhD holder today is the same level as a 1970 junior high school thing? But that's a reflection of how bad things is. That's not necessarily the same in say, the hard sciences, but certainly in sociology or the softer sciences, then that's clearly the case. Gender studies academic, for example, will never have faced a rigorous test, and yet they may have a PhD. So let's have a look at that. I saw a video just recently about it was a gay black school teacher, I think teaching first year high school, a gay black school teacher sitting in a classroom with, rainbow flags everywhere, saying the standard of education was slipping. Oh, yeah. What do you think that is? One of the big exponents of equity and a front line, the black gay with the rainbow flags, one of the frontline players in the equity game and equal outcomes game, is saying that the education standard isn't good enough. So let's have a look at this. I guess just a few things to go. And when I sort of come across high school kids or first year college kids and things like that, they're even ones at the better schools, and they're doing an assignment. And I've mentioned this before in other videos. They're doing an assignment on the great heroes of history, and they're inevitably, it's almost like they come out of a cookie cutter sort of thing. But their heroes are Martin Luther King, Gandhi, and Nelson Mandela. So as long as you're not white and you're fighting it back against whites, you're fighting back against Hitler. As long as that dynamic and is in place, then these people are heroes. Now, isn't it funny? White people in white majority schools, some of the schools are 99% white, being taught by white teachers in an education curriculum developed by white people, in a country that's governed by white people, and yet all the heroes are black. That's how perverted things are at the moment, and have been, by the way, for some time. So I guess I mean, going back to, and it was going back to my years in say high school, it was quite rigorous. If you didn't pass the end of year tests, they would not put you up to the next year. So the view was that if you just got passed through, or anyone got passed through, you'd then be going to another level of learning. And if you couldn't handle this level of learning, then you certainly couldn't handle the level of learning in the following year. And you'd be surrounded by kids who had achieved that, or many kids that had achieved that level. So you couldn't keep up with them, and then you'd feel out of place. The teacher would have to slow the class down in order to look after the weaker student. That would then be unfair to the brighter kids, and so on. So, but at the time, there was a recognition of excellence. There was an end of year sort of ceremony when the kid who came first in mathematics or any of the tests was called up in front of the school, and you got like a prize, which was sort of a book or something like that. You got a prize, and everyone knew that you'd come first, and it was treated as a great honor and a great achievement, that you would excel academically, and there'd be a little, sometimes the student would say, yeah, and I studied hard every night, and those sort of things, and this sort of engendered, I thought, certainly did in me anyway, this idea of, okay, well, I want to do well, and I want to pass exams, and I want to get the prize, and I want to be recognised as an excellent student, and so on and so forth. This idea of excellence and achievement and hard work. Now that's all changed, of course, but that's how it was then. Well, certainly in the schools I was at. There were kids who had failed. They'd been unable to get out of first year, and they kept them there, and they didn't care how old you were. So I remember this kid. He had a beard, and he was, I don't know, I think he might have been. He was from the Mediterranean somewhere, Greek maybe, I don't know. But he had, or maybe one of his parents was Greek. But he had he'd failed the tests 3 years in a row. So he was like 14 years old, going on 15, and he was still in first year, surrounded by kids who were like 11 years old. And we all looked up to him as being the expert on sex, because he was the hairiest sort of dude in the form, as you can imagine. But there are others like him who'd been kept back because they just kept on failing the end of year exams, and they did that at the time. Now they wouldn't do that now, and those kids, the minute they became old enough legally to leave, I think it was 14 years and 6 months old or something, I think it was the minimum age then, they could leave school and go and get a job, become an apprentice or something like that, or just, I don't know, labourer, whatever. But so they would leave school the second that they legally could. But one thing that sort of shocked me was the amount of kids that were in what was called that like the school had given up on them. That these kids were just too dumb to do anything, and they'd created what they call the general activity class. And that's where the dumbest of the dumb kids were thrown. And out of a year of Oh, I don't know, what would it be? Out of a year of 250 kids, say, in the one form, there would have been 15% of them were in this general activity class. So it seems quite astonishing that there were that many, but there were the kids that didn't. But that goes to show, and even in a time of when academic excellence was viewed with some reverence, that many kids just couldn't get through, and there were a lot of kids in the bare past the 50% type thing that were being put through, and they of course struggled when they got into the next year as well. So this was something that happened at the time you passed or you failed. So there was with this if you failed thing, there was a massive exodus from the school at the age of, again, the minimum legal age they could leave. Some of them stuck it out until the end of third year high school, when there was another exodus. Some sort of hung on until a junior high school, getting a junior high school sort of diploma thing. But if they got a crummy, again, the bare pass type thing, then they went as well. So you had this real sort of, look, don't bother staying in school. You're not a good student. You don't really want to be here. You don't like working hard, or you're too stupid, or all of the above. Why don't you go? So they did, and only some sort of stayed on. Now, some had other considerations, like there are some kids who I thought weren't really that dumb, but they had very difficult home lives. There were things like that. So it didn't mean that there weren't other considerations there. But the strictly pass or fail thing was the go. Of course, this is now all changed, so the participation trophies and equity and equal outcomes and affirmative action and racial quota, all these sort of things have gone into. And all of these things militate against excellence or against pass or fail. So the idea is everybody passes and everybody is given a participation. So a degree or a PhD or a master's or a senior high school diploma are now all seen as participation trophies. So it's not surprising that the quality of education has declined. Now, the more you put pressure on to achieve excellence, the more you will suddenly separate any group. There's only a very small number of bright people in any group, and or even it's on a relative thing, the ones that do the best, if you like. But also when framing a test, the test can be extremely rigorous and difficult, where and you can achieve it where hardly anybody passes, or it can be very soft and easy, where you get a mark of 50% just for getting your name right, or something where everybody passes. So the rigor of the test itself and the rigor of the marking and the examination can also affect outcomes. But the lack of rigor, or once you apply rigor, then you straight away separate the people from the can-dos, the higher people of higher ability, and that you separate them. You instantly separate them into categories and classes. But if you don't test them and there is no rigor, then you can argue from an ideological point of view, at least everybody's the same. And therefore, we've achieved equity because everybody's the same. No one's different from anyone else. But that requires, of course, no testing and no rigor to achieve that, which is where we're at now. So that's how the equity program has done it. Well, we'll just remove all rigor, and that's it. Everyone's equal. We'll have a 100-meter Olympic gold medal where if anybody manages to turn up, we'll just give them all a gold medal. It's that level of absurdity. Now, but on top of that, then I mentioned earlier about the propaganda, where kids are being told Nelson Mandela's a great guy, but all white people are evil, fascist Nazis, and so on and so forth. Now, it requires some astonishing mental gymnastics to achieve this, to be able to assert these things, the climate change, but the key globalist talking points of race, gender, climate change, LGBTQ are all hammered heavily in schools. So it's clearly part of the globalist agenda. That can be no accident. So this means that in the end, the kids are being taught to hate white kids in white countries with white governments, and white teachers are being taught to hate white society. and to revere black societies. Now, there's a whole lot of lies, of course, told to do this, the lies of all the bad things white people are supposed to have done, and yet airbrushing and sanitizing any of the the so-called non-white, or the non-white so-called heroes like Gandhi or Mandela or any of the others, Martin Luther King. So if you look at the presentation of, for example, Mandela, there is no reference to him being a terrorist and setting off bombs, indiscriminately killing people. There's no reference to him being offered the get out of prison clause because he's arrested for his terrorist activities. He gets the get out of prison clause where he has to renounce all violence and renounce all associations with terrorist groups. And he refuses to do this. He prefers to stay in prison while he's rather than renounce terrorism and again associations with the terrorist groups. So that's not mentioned. That his wife was going around indiscriminately murdering people. That's not mentioned. The murderous behaviour of his erstwhile colleagues and other that's not mentioned. And vast amounts of truly relevant and central to the discussion facts are all removed or airbrushed out to come out with the thing that Mandela's some great man. He's not. Wasn't. And so why are kids being taught absolute fiction? Now, in the case of wartime where, it's a life and death struggle, you do expect propaganda to come out. You don't want nuanced versions of things floating around. You want strictly, well, they're bad and we're good, and that sort of propaganda. But we're not at war here, or at least not life and death war, but it's an ideological struggle that's perceived as life and death. And therefore, these people, the globalists and their flunkies and stooges and fellow travellers, they think, no, we're allowed to tell any lie in service of the globalist project is permissible, indeed desirable, and anyone that disagrees with it is Hitler and so on. So we've got this propaganda rampaging through the length and breadth of the education departments, but across all Western countries. You don't see it outside of the West. This is the absurd thing. You only see it in the countries that the globalists are targeting for implementing the globalist project. That's where you see the lies. Outside of it, you don't really see it. So anyway, this is a take on what's happening in the education, but how far kids have fallen behind is something of a shock to many. That a 23-year-old, 24-year-old PhD holder, someone who's just got a PhD at the university today, has about the same standard of rigorous education as a 15-year-old did in 1970. That's a shock of the standard, the extent to which education and the standards of education, the quality of education have fallen. But of course, what do you expect when most of the curriculum is built on the most outrageous lies and untruths, willful lies and untruths, and getting education now seems simply as a participation trophy. I interviewed a lot of candidates for applicants for jobs in various companies I've been in, and we're opening up offices all across the United States and that sort of thing. And I was surprised that whenever you went to minorities or any beneficiaries of affirmative action programs and quotas, the quality of the education, or the standard of education they'd received plummeted. So in other words, that they weren't getting a better education. They weren't getting more assistance to become a better student with a better education. Far from it. They were just being, the affirmative action was code speak for participation trophies. We'll just gift you the master's and the PhD or the college degree. So I could be talking to people who had two college degrees or a degree and a master's, and they were still functionally illiterate if they came from a minority group that had been recipients again of the affirmative action participation trophies. But if you had the straight white guy, the straight white male, they were still high standard applicants. So you could look at a CV and say, you know, this guy's got a degree in, I don't know, you know, engineering or something. He was a qualified, you know, he'd studied, he'd worked, he had received a rigorous education, and he was qualified at his job. You know, it could be coding, it could be engineering, it could be whatever. But again, as soon as a minority, then the participation trophy effect came in. But these people not only didn't get a rigorous education, they were actually given free passes. Sort of, we don't want to test you in it. We don't want to do anything that might show you up as an inadequate student, because that might affect you. This, you know, that might make you feel bad or something. So we don't want to do any of that. So not only will we not attempt to make you a better student by giving you a more rigorous education, we won't do that. And on top of that, we'll give you participation trophies to pretend that you are doing well, when in fact you're doing worse than you would have done otherwise. And this is the malaise that we're now in all across the Western world. You've been with Tassos today, your pushback channel. Thank you for listening.